Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I'm so excited today to be joined by Christina Lawford, who is the founder and CEO at Diamond Air International and Evolve Car. And this is also the fourth and final conversation in our special series leading up to International Women Travel and Tourism Forum in London, just going to be happening shortly in June. So I'm so excited to get going and hear from you, Christina. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Well, to kick this off, I'd just love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and your company, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the founder and CEO of Diamond Air International, which is a global essentially a meet and assist company at airports, but we're already also at train stations. And we have a very top tier product, which is called Airport by Invitation. And I'm also the co-founder and CEO of a newer company that I established called Evolve Car, which is provides, again, premium but sustainable zero emission chauffeur car transfers and sharing community, which is, again, centric to airports.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I would also love to hear from you how you actually got into the tourism, hospitality, or aviation industry, and why you saw this as a place that you could really work to create a positive impact or a shift within the industry.
Yeah, but so I'm not going to lie, which I'm sure is good for your podcast. I think that the travel and tourism industry for me was something I fell into. It was one of life's, life's rich tapestry. It took me in that direction. However, initially after the opportunity arose and it presented itself to me, I saw a bigger opportunity. So I started out at Heathrow Airport, and I began to see how I could make a difference in terms of the way people traveled through airports. And what I mean by that is, I started at Heathrow, which is one of the world's busiest airports. And pretty much everyone who's anyone passes through Heathrow to come and go through London as a key gateway. And I just saw the challenges that we're having getting through and navigating the airport. And I just thought, you know what? Someone really needs to start some sort of premium meet and assist service. So off the back of the business I already had at Heathrow, that's exactly what I did, and I started to go into.
Yeah. And so to explain maybe for our listeners a little bit more about what that means, because I think that's something that travelers maybe aren't accustomed to. What service are you offering, or how are you assisting people in navigating through that chaos or that hectic nature of the airport?
Yeah, okay. So Diamond Air is essentially a premium cabin, a premium service. But we do also cater to elderly travelers or perhaps young travelers, or a mum with kids and lots of bags. We're also there. We're quite accessible in terms of price point. So actually, we have quite a broad demographic. So it's not just the super elite that are traveling. But essentially what we do is we meet customers on arrival, departure, and when they're transiting through, and we just assist with the whole process. So whether it's meeting them off the aircraft, whisking them through immigration, customs, assisting with their bags, getting them to their final mode of transport, or it's meeting them on departure, making sure everything's done in advance, they're checked in, they've got the seats they want, again expediting them through all the security and the passenger pinch points, and just making it a more luxurious service, really, where people don't have to worry or think about what they're doing. They just get looked after from plane side to curbside, as it were.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And when we first met, I shared that I had what I thought was an experience similar to what you offered in Egypt many years ago. And it was so incredible to just have that care that you're describing. Like, I just got off the airplane with a group. Someone walked up and greeted us, took all of our passports, put us in this lovely lounge where we had some tea and probably 15 or 20 minutes later, they came back and handed us all our passports, and we walked out to our van. And it, especially in certain destinations where you might feel a little uncomfortable navigating customs, or just if you're weary after a long time of travel, I feel like for me that just really not only elevated my travel experience, but like provided so much ease. So I love that, you know, this is something that you're stepping into, creating a space for, or have been doing for quite some time, not really just stepping into. But well, in terms of the International Women in Travel and Tourism Forum and Women in Travel, I know that you connected with Alessandra Alonso, who is the founder, to support her efforts really in creating impact for marginalized communities and creating employment in the industry, and that you also spend a lot of time volunteering with Charity Crisis over the holidays each year. So I'd love to hear from you why this is important to you, and then give you the opportunity to share a little bit about the work that you are doing with Women in Travel, who you're working with, and what you're working to create.
Yeah, I'd love to, because I'm so excited, and I'm such a massive cheerleader for everything that Alessandra does. So yeah, it's great to have this platform to talk a bit more about it. So I think sort of going back to really the foundations for me. So I've my business is, pretty much 24/7. It's operational. And many years ago, when I was a lot younger, I was made a kind of a bit of a promise to myself and said, when my business doesn't need me on the airport anymore at Christmas time, I really wanted to do something a bit more worthwhile than just eating too many mince pies and watching bad TV. So I literally one year just decided to sign myself, when the business didn't need me working anymore, I decided to sign myself up for a London-based charity called Crisis, which is a homeless charity for single people. And I spent the first last year, I think it was my 17th Christmas, working with them. We invariably do 6 to 8 days over the festive period, working with rough sleepers and the homeless in London. But the first 10 years of that, I ran the women's shelter. Now, they were probably some of the most inspiring women I've ever met in my life. Actually, I have to say the mixture between the volunteers that give up their time, incredible. And the women themselves who were there to give some respite to and help with move on plans, the women were just so inspiring. I think that's where I really first learnt the term resilience. So it's always been close to my heart in terms of women that are either sex trafficked or domestic violence, or getting themselves into a situation where they do end up rough sleeping, they're homeless. And when I many years after, kind of fast forwarding, I was introduced to Alessandra at Women in Travel, and I really felt quite passionate about what she was trying to do and the mission that Women in Travel CIC were on. And when she started to explain to me about one of the programs and the projects that she was looking at was to find women who are more marginalized and wouldn't normally be given opportunities to enter into employment in some areas in the travel industry, it just felt like my two worlds were colliding. So my Christmas world and my travel world. So the first charity that I introduced Alessandra to was Crisis, but I do also work with some other women's charities that help support women, mainly from sex trafficked backgrounds. And it was great to give Alessandra access to these women and these pools of women that really are, as I said, very resilient, but they really are looking to get out of circumstances and situations that really hasn't been their fault that they've got into, and really to better their lives. And I think there's a certain loyalty you get as well if you can give these ladies opportunities and believe in them. So that was really how the project initially happened. And I know that since that, I can't put the credit down to me. Alessandra's done a wonderful job of connecting with lots of women's charities out there to find women that are perhaps more challenged in terms of getting into these career and opportunities. And I've been working with Alessandra in terms of developing the whole project. We are actually looking now. We we've been building a project out called Elevator, which is about more perhaps the luxury sector, which we're in terms of travel, and building out whole courses and facilities and all sorts of great stuff where we can get these women into employment. Now, Diamond Air, we've already given some of these ladies jobs, which has been fabulous, and to just see them grow and flourish, and it's been brilliant. So yeah, it's something that it's just been great to be involved with, but I think it's part of a much bigger opportunity as well. So it's something that's really growing and evolving.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I have really loved to see, as you mentioned, the way that Alessandra has been able to kind of expand impact by creating opportunities like this, especially for women. As many of my listeners know, listening to the podcast, there are more women in the tourism and hospitality industry than pretty much any other industry in the world. However, they're often at entry-level positions, or even working in unpaid positions within families and in the industry, and family jobs and restaurants and B&Bs and that kind of position. But looking at trying to create not only more entry into the industry, but then, as you mentioned, elevate into other higher positions, or in maybe opportunities that they wouldn't have access to otherwise without someone that can just open those doors. And as you mentioned, so many of the women are so determined and driven and, and capable, but because of life circumstances, they've just had doors that have kind of closed to them. And so I think it's so important to create these opportunities. And I was reminded of an experience I had recently traveling in Switzerland. And when I went to travel there, it was one of the first times traveling after the pandemic, and certainly after this podcast. And I really wanted to think about how I could support women while I was traveling. And so I had Googled hotels in Zurich that were women owned, and then kind of also looked at social impact and tourism in Zurich. And I found this chain. And one of their properties, I think it's called the Josephine House, has half of the rooms set aside for women who have been victims of domestic abuse or other circumstances. So they can come and they have a place to stay, but then they also have a program through the government where then they can start training women to work in the properties. And they have 3 different hotels, and they have quite a lot of different programs as well. And for me, I just thought this is such a really inspiring program that could actually really be easily implemented anywhere, and offers the opportunity for businesses to serve communities and also create opportunities. And like you said, find employees that are actually probably going to be the most loyal employees, because they've been in an environment that's so supportive of their success and their growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, from my experience working with these women as well, there's also an element that I think, because they have dealt with so much, what is a challenge, so I think they're really quite, not just the resilience is there, but actually I think they can deal with a lot in quite pressurized environments as well. So yeah,
I think that is a really interesting way of thinking about that. Well, the next thing I really want to talk to you about is being a woman in this industry that is typically very male dominated, especially when you started. The aviation industry looked very different than it does today. I would love to hear from you what challenges you faced then in starting your business, and then also reflecting back on your career. If there's something that you would love to share with your younger self, or if you had a room full of women who are starting out in the aviation industry, what would you like to share with them?
Wow, that's such a good question. So I think firstly, when I started my business, I was 18, and I probably had a really naive, positive outlook on the world, which is great. And to a degree, I'm not that downtrodden that I don't still have that positivity. But I think that working in an airport environment like Heathrow, there's a lot of legacy there. When I started, I don't think any station managers of any of the airlines were women. I think everyone in the senior positions in the airport were men. And I really had this belief that I wanted to change the status quo, and I had a wonderful customer base who would always ask me, but Christina, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? And of course, if I couldn't come up with a good answer, why not? I would find out why not. And I wanted to change it. And these sort of environments are quite hostile to change. So, and the other really interesting dynamic, I think, Christine, when I look back, is that I was very fortunate that I started to, my customer base started to be created from the music and entertainment industry. So we're talking about really the world's most high profile people. And when this young girl comes skipping into the airport thinking she can change the world, and she comes with the world's most high profile people, it doesn't always fall particularly well with everyone, which is sad, but the way it is, the reality. So I think that there were a lot of where perhaps there were legacy VIP teams within airlines, and perhaps the larger flag carriers, should we say, without putting names to those airlines, they were really, really hostile. All they could see was Diamond Air and Christina's team coming in with these people, and literally we were just looking after everyone, the world's greatest, and so that brought a lot of attention to us, but not necessarily favourable or people welcoming that. I think the first time I went to the powers that be at Heathrow and said, could I please get an airside pass to look after my clients to and from the aircraft, I think I was laughed out the ID centre very quickly. And I think there was a statement to follow, something about the hell will freeze over first before you get an airside pass. So now we fast forward 15 years, and not only did we have airside access at Heathrow, the first company ever that weren't appended to one airline or a ground handler, we were an independent commercial company, we had that access to, which I'm still so proud of as an achievement. But actually, I now head up and chair of the Association of Meet and Assist Companies, where we've actually paved the way for other organisations to come in. And now I head up associations globally in terms of where this product takes place, and if there's other peers and organisations in our partner network that are having challenges in some of perhaps more government owned airports that are operated, and there's monopolies perhaps, then we sometimes help them, support them through similar challenges. But I mean, what I would say looking back in terms of, and I wouldn't say for a moment I've been, the victim. I never would say as a woman, but I think that what I look back and I feel sad about is that these station managers who just were so scared of change, rather than running me off the airport, they should have been mentors. And they should be there, the ones to listen to people like me at my age and to help support. And rather than going, and it was very much like, what's she trying to do? And, I think that's what I feel saddest about, is they are the ones, they have a responsibility. If they are in these senior positions, pay it forward, think about the people that are coming up, because the world will progress, so you either kind of get on board and it will change and you've got to adapt or don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think looking for great mentors is such an important thing when speaking with people entering the industry. And I know for myself, I really try to step into that if people have questions about getting into the area of tourism where I work, or, are really interested in learning about an association, or if it's a great fit for them, or who they could connect to learn more. Like, I really try to create time for that, because that's the people that I wish that I would have met when I was younger, to ask those questions, find those connections.
Absolutely, Christine. Yeah.
And it doesn't do any disservice to any of my time. Like, it's usually the most rewarding to connect with people who are really excited about getting in the industry and have these innovative ideas. And then, like you said, they will then, it seems, end up creating something that you needed, that you can build your business even upon to a greater level, or that sense of connection and community is so important. And instead of trying to kind of hold your seat and keep everyone else down around you, I think people are really shifting to the fact that we would all be better served if everyone had access to contributing and bringing their ideas forward and having the connections they need to succeed versus trying to make our position of power the most important position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, as well when I was younger, because, I did start to really elevate in that whole environment and build a business. And I had a lot of employees and some of the comments were just so derogative, especially from the male community, should we say, about, well, how's she doing that? And how's she doing that? And it was just really toxic. But things are, I think things are changing. I'm pleased to say.
Yeah, I feel like that I could recognize that as well.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to talk to you about, and you've kind of tapped onto this in a couple of spaces, is resilience. And I know that you were a part of a book called Unstoppable Women by Griselda Tagobo, and she was really working to share the stories of successful female businesswomen to really show how we can do it, how we can kind of gain strength and wisdom and determination to push forward and create and bring our businesses to life. So I would love to talk to you about that. And, we've talked a little bit about the resilience you needed early in your career. But you kind of mentioned to me this thing that was always in the back of your mind of like, what is the worst case scenario in my business? And would I be able to get through that? And for many of us, that's, what if something happens that puts a full stop to our business? And so working in the tourism industry, we obviously all just, experienced this worst case scenario. So I would love to talk to you about resilience in general, but, kind of what the pandemic brought into your company and how that became a catalyst for you to even move in different directions and continue to be innovative in your business.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you've touched on this because I think it's so important that, I know it's a bit cliche, but I think, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger, without any doubt. And I have had challenges, through my career and I'm running a business. But I think the pandemic was absolutely, as you say, a time that just kind of stopped everyone in their tracks, and it was really the worst case scenario. So I think for me it was always a feeling of, oh my god, what happens if I lost my business? What happens if it all kind of comes crashing down? And I think we can probably all put it down to pretty much a date in the diary when exactly that happened and we all just fell off this cliff. And I think that initially there was a lot of panic. I was on the board, and I got voted in this chair for the BTA, which is Business Travel Association. So I'm the chair for the industry partner board, and I think we were all getting on those conference calls and looking at each other from every sector of the travel industry going, what the hell? What do we do now? And I did find that supportive, to have other people and peers around, because actually no one really knew, but at least there was that feeling of camaraderie and we're all in the same boat. But I think that I just knew that I couldn't let, things fail, and I had got so far, and again it's a bit cliche, but you can't just get so far to just suddenly go, right, that's it, this is the end. And I think what was interesting for us as an organization was that the COVID testing became suddenly an overnight huge factor in, well, if you are actually going to travel, this is what you need to do. And our clients started coming to us and saying, do you know where we can get COVID testing? And the big problem in that market space, Christine, was that there was loads of COVID testing, but the problem was that actually you couldn't, if you were traveling on a Tuesday and you needed a PCR test, there was nowhere to go and get one on a Sunday 40 hours before, and et cetera, et cetera. So people were actually planning their travel around their COVID testing and not the COVID testing around the travel. So I just thought, you know what? So I actually spoke to my management team, and those not on furlough, and said, look, I think I've got an idea, but this is going to take a bit of work. And we literally had just moved into new offices at Heathrow, beautiful new offices that suddenly we didn't need. need. So I repurposed the space and created some clinics. And I actually recruited some nurses from the NHS. And we formed partnerships with a couple of laboratories that could do particularly quick turnaround times for us. And we pivoted into COVID testing. It was actually almost like running a startup. It was just within a business, it was another business, and it was virtually a startup. But we adapted, and I think from start to finish, we did not have one person who didn't get the results in a timely manner, who didn't make their flight in comfortable time. We didn't have one failure. And what was important for us was we were still going to be Diamond Air when we came out. We weren't just a pop-up COVID testing company who could disappear after the pandemic. We had to keep our integrity. We had to keep our customers, and, you know, we had to keep our standards. So that's really what we did. So that got us through, and I'm so pleased to say that, and I'm really proud of what we all did. And you know, we saved a huge amount of jobs, and also it gave us a platform to bounce out of the pandemic a lot quicker. So I'm really pleased to say, you know, we've just finished our financial year end, and actually, even though we were coming out of COVID, we had our best year ever. And so we're actually probably more efficient as an organization. But I do think as well that resilience isn't about one person. You know, resilience really is about your people that you've got around you, and finding that again, that community, that you know, your people, and that I think that's what resilience is really about. Actually, it's not down to one person or individual. It's about people collectively in a group getting together and making it through challenging circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking that it feels like one person, it's kind of just like grit and tenacity and just like doing whatever you can to survive, but it's not necessarily creating something that's thriving out of it. But the resiliency is, like you said, this ability to kind of come together cohesively and adapt and persevere. That feels more like a thriving place to be. And so
absolutely. And I think a couple of other opportunities that came out of it. I mean, I think a lot of people started to have conversations and get together that wouldn't normally, and that was competitors and people in my field. So through that, and I think probably off the back of COVID, I don't think I would have been as big and brave to have suddenly, I did my first acquisition last year on another company, and then we started another huge project at Heathrow, which is again just evolving the whole concept of how people travel. And I think I have to say that I don't know if I'd have done either of those, Christine, if it wasn't for actually getting through you know, the pandemic and making it through, and just having that feeling of actually, you know, I'm quite courageous now.
Yeah.
So, you know, hey, bring it on.
Yeah. And then also knowing that you have the trust in your team to say, okay, here's something else that I want to create, and you know how they're going to be able to handle that or take that on, or that you're going to be able to grow in order to,
a really good
to
point.
bring
Yeah,
something else to life. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I'm so excited to share this conversation with our listeners. I hope people are getting really excited for the International Women Travel and Tourism Forum. And if they haven't already registered, they definitely need to look into joining us there, because I know there's going to be so many great conversations like this one. And I think, you know, as we mentioned about getting people together and innovations, I think these spaces are the places where some of these shifts can happen when we align ourselves with other women that are really working to create the change that I think so many of us are.
Absolutely.
Before we end the conversation, I have just two more rapid fire kind of questions that I usually end my normal podcast with. So I want to share those with you. The first is, what are you reading right now?
Actually, it's kind of not connected, but it is kind of connected to some of what we've been talking about. But actually, week before last, I was over in the Middle East, Christine, and I tend to find that when I'm traveling, that triggers my interest in somewhere or something I want to read about or understand more. But I think Middle East is fascinating, and it's a great place it was. And we traveled through a lot of the GCC countries. I kept having the same conversation with people about the women in Saudi. And even though I didn't travel to Saudi myself, but I went to most of the other countries in the Middle East, and they all kept having the same conversation, but we're not Saudi, and this is what happens. And just suddenly having these normal conversations with people about, oh, they've just allowed women to drive and allowed women to have their bank accounts the first time, and finding myself having a normal conversation back to these people going, oh, really, that's really interesting. And then thinking, what have I just heard? So I actually started reading a book after that called Daring to Drive. And it's about a woman who became, without knowing it really, just a bit of an activist in terms of, really progressing things forward and becoming a driver out there, which seems a bit extreme to talk about, but it was just something that really fascinated me to understand a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I love finding either fiction or nonfiction around a place that I'm traveling as well, to just
love it,
dive in and find more context for the places that you're traveling to. Well, the last question is really just giving you the space to recognize another woman in the industry. Soul of Travel is really, that is what we're dedicated to, is creating a space for women in the industry. So if there's someone you would like to recognize, I'd love to give you the space.
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think there were probably, when I was growing up, as I said, it was very male dominated and there were less women. I think that were in more senior positions, or, that you could look up to. I think now I feel that actually some of those women I really admire, all my peers and women I stand shoulder to shoulder through. And I think one woman in particular I would have to say shout out is Edwina Silo. Now, I'm fortunate enough to say that she's actually working in my team now, but Edwina was actually heading up the AOC at London Heathrow. The AOC is the Airline Operators Committee. She was basically the conduit between Heathrow Airport as the operator and every single airline. So you're talking 80, 90 airlines at Heathrow, and everything that they needed, and all the different facets that go into running an airport. But when she first started in that role, she would walk in and they would just turn around and say, so you're here to take the notes. And I think for what she did and the changes she brought to the aviation industry, I think, she needs to be commended. But as I said, I'm very, very lucky now because actually she's working in our team at Diamond Air. So
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And as you mentioned that, I was just reflecting back on my conversation with Elieza Sakiri, who is a part of this series as well. And she said how many times she walked into a room and she was the person asked to take the notes, even though she was there to, be in the leadership team or lead the meeting. And so people listening, definitely go back and listen to that episode, because we talked specifically about that, what that means for women in leadership roles as well. But thank you so much again for joining me. I can't wait to see you soon. And I really appreciate your time.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.